Seeing the nods, thumbs up. How's everyone doing?
Yeah. Nervous.
Lively Thursday morning? Nice. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
All right, want to get started? All right, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending your morning with us. We're going to talk a little bit about customer journey mapping and emotion mapping along that customer journey. So we've got a great presentation for you today. Hopefully you feel the same way that we do. So my name is Emily Bielek. I'm a director at the Martec Group. I've been there for almost 9 years at this point. And I've been leading this project with Goldfish Swim School. So we've got Alex here. He'll do a quick intro in a sec. But just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the CX transformation that we're undergoing currently. So we're not even done with this project, but we've got a lot of good stuff that we've already covered. So I want to talk a little bit about that with you guys today. But first, Alex is going to kind of walk through the Goldfish background and kind of the scenario.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Valencia. I'm the Marketing Performance and Analytics Manager for Goldfish Swim School Franchising. The company was founded in 2006, decided to franchise in 2008. First franchise location opened in 2009, and then we've opened 149 locations ever since. So we're at 151 today. We'll be at 161 by the end of the year. I've been with the brand for about 9 years. I started on the franchise side, moved to the franchisor in 2018. Moved through a few different roles, and in my latest one have been working with data, research, really partnering with them to make sure that this is a very successful initiative. So kind of with some of that background where Goldfish has been, I want to give you a bit of a problem statement up here, right, or the old Goldfish situation, as it were, right? So this time last year, we had a leadership team, very, very experienced, probably about 100 years of collective franchise experience between them, right? So a lot of service brand people, construction people, really good marketing experience. But everybody was always coming at it from their perspective, as they should, right? Really experienced C-suite leaders. I get it, you come with a lot of weight, but at the same time, were we always addressing the right problem, right? So everybody wanted to say, gosh, if only our technology could do this, or hey, if our marketing just had this image in it, or geez, if we had this process documented from an operations perspective. And it was a lot of talking past each other, and the reality was, why does that even make a difference to your customer, right? And are you addressing the right problem in those meetings? And so we really needed to get a better understanding of the customer experience in a more collaborative way, not just in our own silos. And that's really where we introduced Martec. So around this time last year, we really started evolving the conversation with our leadership team and saying, gosh, we really need to assess our customer experience. Sure, we know where people sign up and we hand them a welcome bag on their first day, but what are the challenges in that? What are the frustrations, right? And ultimately, how can we have a partner that helps us brainstorm and determine attractiveness of some of these new CX concepts and making sure that we're really driving home what our customers want from their experience?
Awesome. So when we first were talking with Goldfish about a year ago about this initiative, right, they wanted to overhaul their CX strategy. So we kind of really needed, where do we start with that, right? So I want to draw your attention to this slide. What we do at Martec with our CX strategy, it's really based on the peak end theory. If anyone's familiar with it, it's a Daniel Kahneman kind of thought where basically your experience can be summed up by the peak and the end of your experience with something. And that could be anything from your experience with a brand, service, product, travel, right? Like the example I like to give for this is when I went to Machu Picchu a few years ago. The peak of my experience was absolutely when you walk through the doors. If anyone's been there, you know what it's like when you're about to walk in, and it's something that had been on my bucket list forever. So that was absolutely the peak highlight, best part of my experience. And then the end, unfortunately, I hit about 12 hours of flight delays. So that was kind of the lasting impression I had on that experience, which obviously was not as pleasant as the peak, right? A couple other moments that we really look at are the very beginning stages, right? So this could be any way that a brand interacts with the customer before that customer is actually a customer, right? So I've driven past Goldfish Swim Schools for years, right? I know where the locations are, but I'm not necessarily a parent in the market that wants to send my kid to a swim school yet, right? Well, I guess now I am, but before, right? And then the trigger point is the last memorable moment that we really hone in and focus on. So the trigger point is when you actually decide to interact with that brand, right? So for a parent in a swim school market, right, there's other options out there. That's when you choose to actually interact with Goldfish, for example. So we call them memorable moments, and really they're kind of like the anchor on how we align our customer journey maps right throughout the entire customer experience. Sometimes people call them moments of truth. We call them memorable moments. So when we were looking at the CX strategy overall, we really wanted to have a lot of time to go through, get a lot of the upfront work, I guess. So we spent a lot of time on the discovery phase of things. We did a lot of corporate stakeholder interviews. Goldfish is a franchise system, so we wanted to speak with franchisees. We spoke with a lot of vendors and third-party stakeholders to really get a full picture of what's happening, right? We want to understand everybody's perspective before we go into actually doing the customer work itself. Next, we go into the diagnostic phase, so that's the second of the 5 Ds. Sometimes we call it a CX audit also, where we're talking with the customers through primary research. So we did a lot of qualitative interviews, and we also did a really high sample survey to really kind of, I guess, have those baseline metrics. We knew what KPIs we were going to be looking for, but we wanted to get that baseline number for a lot of them. We did a full customer journey map, and we actually refreshed their segmentation and personas since they hadn't done it post-COVID. So we all know how much things have changed post-COVID. So with that in mind, we were able to kind of pinpoint what are the points of friction and what are the challenges, pain points, unmet needs that the Goldfish customer is experiencing today. So once those were all identified, we went into our design phase. So we worked collaboratively with the Goldfish leadership team. We had this massive workshop one day where we basically were just brainstorming solutions to meet those pain points and those challenges. So after that, actually this week, next week, and the following week, we're testing those concepts, first with franchisees to get their feedback. You know, is this doable at your school? Is this something that we think will be successful? And then we're going to be talking with customers as well to see, you know, how interesting, attractive those concepts are. Next, after that, we're going to be entering the 4th phase, which is like our deployment phase. So that's actually going to be mostly on Goldfish's shoulders to get done. So that'll probably be like a Q4 initiative for them. And essentially that will be taking the successful concepts that tested well with both franchisees and customers, and then they'll be deploying them in Q4. And then after that, we're going to have like an ongoing tracking and measurement program to decide, right, whether those are working or not. And if not, that's okay. It's just back to the drawing board, right? More time to brainstorm more solutions.
And there are just a couple things that I want to highlight from the business side around the process overall that I thought was really instrumental in how we've shifted our focus at Goldfish. So a lot of the discovery work is really heavy up front. You need a really good partner internally, somebody who can really be a champion for the research, making sure that you're pulling in all the right people at all the right times. And so what it does is naturally forces you to create a North Star and say, hey, customer experience, this research, these deliverables are a year away. We need your feedback now to make sure that we're running in the right direction, right? We need to make this effort worthwhile. And what that naturally creates for you is a really, really strong change management plan, because suddenly everybody knows exactly what you're doing. You're constantly talking about it. And I think that's the part that could be a miss for a business, is if they didn't naturally incorporate that, right? Nothing's worse than getting an initiative to the finish line and then nobody adopts it, right? And so this process really helped us incorporate change management naturally, and we've gotten a lot of buy-in for that reason. So I just want to make sure I highlighted that for the businesses.
So when we look at the CX audit specifically, that diagnostic phase, so that's what I'm going to be sharing out today, is a lot of the information that we shared with Goldfish at that point. But one of several goals that we had during that phase was to kind of map, characterize, quantify different emotions along the customer journey, essentially, right? We wanted to understand those peaks and valleys. So if there's dips in emotional experience along the customer journey, how can Goldfish create strategies to mitigate those issues, right? How can we solve for a better customer experience? So we use our emotion intelligence tool, which I'll talk a little bit more about, to score and map emotions along that customer journey, which we'll also walk through. And really what we were able to do is to uncover those pain points, right? Find the exact points of friction along that customer journey. And then that gives us the roadmap for how we're going to be improving those pain points. So here's a customer journey map. I want to point out that this is fictitious, right? So this is the template we use, but this is information that we just have for this purpose today. So we've got Pleased Piper here, and what we wanted to do was talk through all of the steps that Piper goes through in her customer journey with Goldfish or with Swim School, right? And then emotions are always in a customer, well, almost always in a customer journey, I think, if you're doing it correctly. And then considerations, right? Like, what are the business considerations for this segment or this persona along the customer journey, right? What are some key challenges? What are some things to consider? That's where the data comes into play, where it's like, okay, we know 60% of this segment is behaving this way. So those will be, what sorts of things do we need to think about as a business because of that? And then finally, the touch points, which I think we all probably know are the specific points of interaction between Piper and Goldfish, right? A customer and a brand. So I'll just quickly walk you through the Pleased Piper customer journey map. So first, Piper becomes aware, right, of Goldfish. She's starting her decision process. She considers her options, right? She starts doing some research. She knows that she wants to send her kids to swim school. She does a little bit of internet sleuthing. This segment is not particularly going to go do a tour, but we did notice that other segments were really keen on doing the tour. After a few weeks of research, Piper then decides to enroll by either calling the school or enrolling online. She's not on a wait list and is able to attend class a week later. This was actually a pretty big sticking point for us, that we found just how much of a challenge the wait list is. We didn't realize that the customers were having such a bad experience being on a wait list because some of them are not on a wait list. So for some segments, this was like a really big issue. So eventually, Piper enrolls. She goes to her first class with her kids. She attends class weekly, right? Falls into this routine cadence of going every week. She's there for a certain amount of time. Eventually, Piper withdraws. She doesn't need to go to swim school forever, right? And then finally, she either does or does not recommend, right? So she either becomes an advocate for the Goldfish brand, recommending it to her friends and family, or she doesn't if she doesn't have a great experience. So one of the key things here was the emotional connection, right? And the emotional experience. So a lot of what we see happening in the market is you can kind of guess, right, based on qualitative interviews. So you could go and do 10 interviews and think that you have a great understanding of the emotional experience at Goldfish, but what we're lacking there is the quantification of those emotions and also scaling it beyond the qualitative interviews. So if we know that people are feeling nervous or excited or frustrated, how can we compare those three? How do we know which one is the stronger feeling, right? If you've got a mixed bag, how do you know which one is the prevailing emotion? How do you scale that, right, in a seamless, simple way for people to know, instead of 10 qualitative interviews, we want to do 1,200 online survey interviews with people. So the good news is we found a solution. Again, fictitious example here, but the gray line is essentially the pleasant emotions that Piper, well, the gray line is the mean, so that would be all segments, and then the blue line is just Piper, right? So you can see how the Piper persona or segment is doing compared to the overall experience. So, right, at the very beginning stages, Piper is doing a little bit less. She's not as excited, or her emotions aren't quite as pleasant as the rest of the group, but at attendance level, right, that routine attendance, Piper's super happy. Like, she's doing great. Her emotions are really high compared to the other segments, right? And those are drawn down by one or two segments that are having a really low experience there. So on the scheme of things, she's pretty in line with the overall, right? But looking at this by segment was super interesting because you could tell which segments we need to cater a little bit more messaging to, where we need to intervene, where we need to personalize the experience to make it better for them.
Yeah, and for our part, really, this was already a pretty radical shift in the way we looked at the journey. You know, everybody in our business probably could have laid some of these things out, but the way that we got into a routine about talking about the technology that supports it or the process that stands it up really got us away from the customer, right? So when we would talk about things like enrollment, we'd say, oh, well, we can do that online through our portal, or for waitlists, our franchisees would say, gosh, I wish the waitlist management functionality was better, right? And the whole time it was like, okay, we're focused on this problem, gosh, we need to work with our technology vendors to make this better, but why does your customer care that your waitlist is difficult to manage for you? They just want the spot to be available, right? And so we really needed to reorient ourselves, and I think this really helps display how we did that.
So how did we do that? We have this emotion intelligence tool. I would be remiss if I didn't use the term AI today. It is AI-based, but we do actually, we call it augmented intelligence actually, because we have a human being that sits there and checks every single word. But essentially, we can take any language-based data, structured or unstructured, and in this case, we did it with the survey that we sent out, as well as the qualitative interview transcripts. And we run it through this AI tool to understand what emotions customers are feeling, and we were able to do it at different stages of the journey. So essentially the AI tool plucks out the emotion words that it captures and then maps them into 32 different channels. So those channels can be rolled up into 8 different groups. When we talk about emotions, right, there's so many different properties to them. They can be pleasant or unpleasant, they can be active or passive, there's different passion levels. So there's so many things that go into our emotions. And they're all based on Plutchik's wheel of emotions. So that's how we got to those 32 different channels, which again, we roll up into 8 groups a lot of the time. So essentially what we're able to do is quantify each of those emotions. So if we have that structured data or unstructured data going in, we know which channels they're mapping to. So we can kind of compare and contrast them to each other. So this is the Martec Emotion Score. So this is how we're able to score emotions. Essentially what we do, if we're just focusing on how pleasant an emotion is, right? So let's set aside things like how active or passive, how interested you are. This is just capturing the net level of pleasantness, essentially, of that emotion. So it's on that same kind of -100 to 100 scale that NPS is on, and it strongly correlates with other CSAT metrics, right? Like likelihood to recommend, customer satisfaction. So essentially what we're able to do is say, this emotion is this positive in this light compared to other areas on the journey. So I think this is probably the view that matters the most, and what was super impactful for Goldfish specifically was when we take that level of pleasantness, right? How pleasant are the emotions being experienced along the customer journey? You can see the high points, right? When you initially make the decision to enroll your children in swim school, you're all jazzed up, you're excited, your kids are gonna go learn how to swim. When your kid's moving up a level and they're graduating, you're really proud of them and really excited. But you can see where the dips are, and I think this was what was new for Goldfish, was they had never looked at it in this lens before, where you can see the exact values of where people kind of drop off emotionally. So next we wanted to look at it kind of along the customer journey, but bucketed it into those 8 different emotion channels. So the very first one, well, I guess the left 4 are unpleasant emotions, right? You have contempt, discomfort, dread, sorrow, and then on the right-hand side, they're more pleasant emotions: serenity, amazement, joy, loyalty. So what we did, each of the bars is one of the different stages of the journey. So for example, the initial decision to enroll, most people are super excited, right? So that funnels into the joy category, the joy emotion. Some people are interested, right? They're like, they want to know what's going on. We're really excited. We want to hear more about what's going to be happening at Goldfish. But there's very few emotions on the left-hand side here, right? So not a lot of people feeling contempt, discomfort, dread when they're first making that initial decision to enroll. When they head into the research phase, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag. So you have some people feeling overwhelmed. You do have a lot of people that are feeling eager. Most people, however, are feeling curious, right? doing their homework, they're figuring out what swim school they want their kid to go to, they're learning more about the process and what their kid's going to be experiencing. Before the first lesson, this was, I think, one of the eye-opening moments for us and for Goldfish, was kind of this 50-50 split, essentially, between either feel very nervous or very excited before my first lesson. So what can we do? And we're talking with the parents here, right, not the kids. So what can we do to help prepare those parents to either know what to expect better or to feel more prepared going into their first lesson? So some of these things, I don't want to say they're easy, because nothing's easy, but perhaps lower hanging fruit than we realized, right? Like, what if it's as simple as sending them a message the day before, saying, here's everything you need to know, here's what skills your kid is going to be working on, here's what you need to bring, where you should park, what time to get there, everything you can expect, which it seems pretty simple when you think about it, but we needed the data to tell us that that was the case, right? Like, we didn't know exactly what people were feeling, so we want to essentially move people from that nervous bucket into the excited bucket.
Yeah, I think that proactive communication for us was huge. We had a tendency to really focus on what's the experience on the water? How are the instructors doing? We poured all of our training into that, but clearly there was a glaring miss for us on what about your first impression? What about the first time somebody interacts with you and gets a sense of what it's going to be like to attend the school regularly? What are their expectations, right? How can we help them feel better about those things? And so that was really important for us to just kind of take a step back, circle it, and then workshop a little bit how we can improve that communication.
I think another thing too to mention here is the competitive element too, right? So if you are a parent sending your kid to swim school, you should definitely look at Goldfish. But there are other options, right? So you might, right? We looked at other competitors to see what they were doing at this point, and some of them might have a little bit better strategy here. So it's not only do we have the data showing that people are either nervous or excited, but we know what competitors are doing. And if they're doing something that helps their customer feel more prepared before that first lesson, they're probably moving into that excited bucket instead of the nervous bucket. So next is routine class attendance. This was kind of a mixed bag too, and different when we looked at the different segments or personas. Most people are feeling pretty happy, pretty productive. A few people mentioned being bored, right? There's part of swim school curriculum inherently, you're working on the same skills every week as part of this project. I've been going, I have twins that are almost 2, so it's been a lot of fun, but I've also been able to get that firsthand experience of, when you're going for a few months and they're working on the same thing, I can understand why people might feel like it's a little boring. But on the flip side, every week you see a little bit of progress, right? They're able to kick their feet a little bit better, and it's so much fun and so rewarding to actually watch the progress real time. So of course I would fall into one of the happier, productive buckets, but totally understand the perpetual enrollment and why some people might have some of those feelings on the left-hand side. Again, we'll show kind of the difference by segment, but that's been really critical for us. And then moving up a level, so this would be after you've completed the level you're at, right? There's different levels based on age and skill level. So the inherent feeling here is pride, right? If your kid's graduating and moving up to the next level, that's awesome, right? That means your kid mastered their current level, they know what they're doing, right? So that's really exciting for a lot of people. They're primarily proud, happy of their kid. However, there was a little bit of unpleasant emotions, feeling annoyed, right? So now I got to find a new time for my kid to go. They're in this new class. I don't know what to expect, right? I'm a little nervous. I'm fearful that they're, maybe they're getting in over their head, or there's new skills. They don't know how to do these things yet. So that was a bit of a shock to us, because we thought this was going to be, overwhelmingly pleasant emotions, which it is, but there's a little bit more of the unpleasant emotion than we were expecting. And then withdrawal. So this is, everybody's got to leave at some point, right? So again, kind of a mixed bag, 50-50 here on pleased, fulfilled, content. They went to swim school, they stayed until they felt like the swim school had done their job, so it was great for them. They had a really positive experience. And then actually the unhappy really came from being sad to leave, right? So a lot of customers kind of come back year after year, they withdraw for a period of time, and then they might come back. So some of the emotions here, kind of pulling on those heartstrings, might be a good campaign for Goldfish to target those people to come back in the future, because we know that they're unhappy and kind of sad that they left. So when we look at it by segment, I think this was another way that was new for Goldfish to look at, certainly new for us. But you can see a lot of divergence here, right? So at that initial decision to enroll your children in swim school, you can see different segments have different emotional experiences there. Some people are really liking that. Some people really hate that. It goes down when they're researching, right? People are feeling overwhelmed. They're not super happy. There are too many options, right? And then before your first lesson, that dip is really what was eye-opening to us and caused by those nerves that some of the parents are feeling. However, when you get to the routine class attendance, that's where we obviously saw the biggest divergence. As you can tell, those dots are pretty far apart. So that implies to us that some segments are really loving that routine class attendance, right? They're feeling the productive, happy, their kids making progress, and others are not seeing that progress, or they don't know how to measure that progress, so it's tough for them. That's one of the kind of pain points we identified, was understanding your child's skill progression. And what does that look like for different families? And how do they like to receive the feedback on how their kid's progressing in their skills? So you can see, how do we look at the yellow segment that's way below, the gray segment, how can we do things to improve that experience, right? Are there certain ways that they would like to receive feedback differently so that they feel like their kid is progressing better or at a quicker pace, so it kind of elevates that experience for them? Are there ways that we can personalize the experience, or is there a communication preference, right? Would they prefer to be communicated via text or via email? So all of those things kind of go into that experience overall. And then, of course,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, what I was just going to add was, for us, like, the disparity was just so glaring, just because we didn't realize that we weren't serving all of our customers the same way, right? We wanted to be able to personalize everything to the customer, but more or less they should all receive that, what we call the golden experience, one of our core values. And that showed us without a doubt that we were not living that out, right? And so that really helped us draw on to say, and Martec helped us break down what are all the things that comprise that, kind of like Emily laid out. And so I just wanted to make sure that I called some attention to that. That is huge for a business to be able to pay attention to.
Right, you can pluck out the people that behave like that yellow line down there, right? And understand, okay, so let's dig into the data here. What are these people doing? How do they rate us on all these certain aspects of the experience? How do they like to be communicated with? So whatever we can do to kind of uplift that group from down there and bring them, as high as that top blue bar, obviously that's the goal. And then children graduating and moving up a level, pretty positive experience across all the segments. And then again, it dips down when they're withdrawing because they're sad to leave. So where do we go from here, Alex?
Where do we go from here? So first of all, we have to address the operational and technical pain points, right? So class changes and waitlist management were what we identified when it comes to attending those routine classes, those, hey, I moved up a level, and experiencing some of that dread around some of the uncertainty of, will I be able to get the time that I need, things like that, right? But more importantly is, okay, well, how do we know it worked, right? We're gonna make some of these changes, we're gonna change some of our processes, we're gonna change some of our communication, but if we don't measure it, it's kind of a waste, right? And so Martec's helping us implement some regular CX tracking, and the really cool stuff for the business is, well, now how does that correlate to things like customer lifetime value? Do we see it tick up as we improve the communication, right? Do we see people staying longer, right? Are we driving that loyalty, some of those more positive or productive emotions, right? And so really empathy-based data, is the way that they're helping us look at it. And the most important thing for us on the franchise side, of course, is starting with our customer and getting them to change their focus, right? So I'm not the person who's directly delivering swim lessons anymore. I was 9 years ago. But ultimately today, I need other people to be able to go live that out for us, right? And so we need to make sure that they're paying attention to the most important parts, which is ultimately the frustrations their customer has and how they can solve those problems to drive that lifetime value.
Excellent. So we have a couple of resources here. So we actually have included an RFP builder if you're interested in, considering your own customer journey mapping work, as well as a QR code here if you're interested in downloading today's slides.